Hello, everyone. I'm Hill Harper, and it's such an honor to follow someone I have so much respect for, someone who I've worked with before, Dr. Bernice King. And, listening to Dr. King, I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes of her father, where her father said, "We're all tied together in a single garment of mutual destiny." He said, "We're all tied together in a single garment of mutual destiny," which means all of us are inextricably linked. Our futures are inextricably linked together. And that, to me, quote, speaks squarely to this issue of gun safety. Because if we are responsible in the way that we create and enact laws around assault weapons, around gun technology, we represent the fact that guns, as they move, are inherently dangerous, particularly assault weapons and assault weapons that have the technology of mass destruction and mass harm. And Dr. King brought up the Second Amendment, and I wasn't planning to speak necessarily on the Second Amendment, but when I heard her, she inspired me, like she inspired so many of us. And I remember my days at Harvard Law School, and when I was studying the Second Amendment, there's a law school class everybody who goes through Harvard Law School and every law school across the country has to take, and that's constitutional law. And as I was studying constitutional law, their Second Amendment would always obviously come up. You know, it's early, and when we talk about the Second Amendment, what we begin to realize, and I think what Dr. King was actually alluding to, is the fact that there's language in there that's very specific, and it talks about the right to bear arms and how important that was. And without question, to the founding fathers and the authors of the Constitution and the Constitutional Assembly, it was important for citizens to have that right. Yet for us today, we have to take a view of what does arms actually mean. There are only three words in the Second Amendment that are capitalized. Arms is one of them. And usually when you capitalize something, you give it some importance. So I think being able to think about and talk about in a real way what arms means and what that right means speaks to where we are today. And I'll use that as a jumping off, as an analogy, and I'll show you where I'm going here. So when the framers founded the Constitution and framed it in the Second Amendment, arms was a front-loaded musket, a front-loaded musket. And that's what arms were. And as far as they were concerned, they were giving everyone the right to a front-loaded musket. You had the right to have that for individual liberty, defense, etc. Some years after, not that far after, there was an element invented called TNT, which was an explosive device. Now, what was interesting about that is that everyone could buy TNT. You could go into your corner store, you could get it, you could blow something up because people were building and they were blowing things up, and you could buy TNT. But as explosive technology evolved, and we saw the ability to create larger and larger and larger explosions, the ability to purchase legally explosive devices, or the technological evolution of TNT as an example, was taken away. Yet, and the argument there is that the technological advance is not the same as what was originally allowed and legal. The atomic bomb, a nuclear bomb, all of these things can cause mass destruction and be it can be weaponized in a massively destructive way because of the technological evolution for an explosive device. Now, if we apply that same logic to gun safety. And we start with our founding fathers, the Second Amendment defining guns or arms as front-loaded muskets. And then we see the technological advancement in guns, okay? The idea that over time, just like explosive devices, guns have gotten to a point technologically where they have the ability to cause mass harm in an extremely short period of time. And those would be assault weapons with high mags and cartridges. That is not, those assault rifles are certainly not what our founding fathers envisioned with the Second Amendment. So everyone who hides behind the Second Amendment in this issue, we're actually talking about the definition of what arms are, because they use this idea of the right to bear arms as a defense, yet it's quite clear that just as a nuclear bomb is very different than TNT, an assault rifle, semi-automatic or modified for automatic, with a 30 plus mag round capability, couldn't be more different technologically than a single front-loaded musket. And so to treat them the same is just as abhorrent and misguided as if we treated TNT the same as nuclear weapons. Weapons of mass destruction, both assault rifles as well as extreme explosive devices. Now, so what do we do? How do we look at it? What should we do? So we should frame this in a way where folks still have the right to a weapon of their choosing, but a weapon that is more in keeping with what the definition of arms are and not so far away. Also, we can be smart in other ways. So what are those? We've talked about technology and how technology has evolved weapons. So therefore, we can use the same technological evolution to help with gun safety. So the vast majority of gun safety measures that are technologically driven have been blocked or attempted to be blocked by lobbyists, the NRA, etc. What's an example? One example would be the technological ability to have a single-use weapon, meaning the weapon is tagged to the hand of the user and that user only. So therefore, that weapon is directly tied to that single person and it cannot be used by anyone else. It's just like when you pick up your phone and you don't want someone else to be using your phone. I would hope you wouldn't want someone else to be using your gun. Yet that technology exists, it has existed, and it has been blocked. It should be mandated. Again, semi-automatic and automatic weaponry, assault rifles should be banned. The ability to have mass destruction, weaponization of a technologically advanced fire device. Folks want to use terms like firearms, they want to use terms like guns. It is a device it's a killing device. Now, if we're talking about a single load rifle or single load shotguns or things that are much closer to what arms are and defined by our founders, then we can decide where that line lies. But I think most of us can agree that these high clip, high mag, semi-automatic AR-15s, et cetera, do not fit that. And they couldn't be more different than what our founding fathers actually intended. The one great thing about the Constitution and what I learned at Harvard Law School is that the amendments are there to protect our democracy and to protect our citizens. And if we don't act to protect our citizens through smart gun safety legislation, through an assault weapons ban, through the ability to pull back and define specifically what guns constitute arms under the Second Amendment, and be very clear about what that line is. We're very clear about those lines in so many other areas. Yet with guns, we've allowed profit and the profit motive of the gun manufacturers to dictate that line. And basically their dictation is the line doesn't exist, so we can sell as much as we can and make as much money and profit as we can. Unprecedented profits in this industry over the past number of years. We know it, and we know that with those profits come their ability to send lobbyists and more lobbyists and influence elections and et cetera, et cetera. These elections, these lobbyists aren't more important than American lives. We're the greatest country in the world because we are a participatory democracy, and we can't allow profit motive to overwhelm our democracy and to do things that we know are correct, we know are true, and we know are right. Dr. King just laid out a number of things. So let's use the best of the technology that's available to actually make these weapons safer, number one. And number two, let's use our ability of discernment to define a line of what constitutes arms and be very clear about that. It takes courage, it takes strength. One of my favorite words in the English language is the word courage. The etymology of that word is, if you speak French, you know, is coeur, which means heart. So in many ways, courage is not the antithesis of fear. What it is just getting into your heart. And if we really get into our heart and understand how many families have been destroyed, how many lives have been taken, how many children have been killed, how many citizens, particularly from the most marginalized and challenged communities, have been injured, killed, etc. Because our unwillingness and inability to act on sensible gun legislation and an assault weapons ban, all of these things matter. And we can do that. Because as Dr. King's father said, we are all tied together in a single garment of mutual destiny. We are all tied together in a single garment of mutual destiny. I'm happy to work with any of you to help push sensible reform forward and create that line that is sensible and bring groups of people together and ultimately organize and vote out members who do not support what 9 out of 10 Americans support, which is getting rid of weapons of mass destruction in the form of bullets. They can be dispensed quite quickly and be purchased quite quickly. I'll also say this. My father was a mental health professional, God rest his soul. He was a psychiatrist who dealt with people coming out of the prison system, early release programs, etc. And obviously, mental health support is a big piece of much of this. But the much bigger piece is following other countries' leads and limiting access in very specific ways. Many countries have had extremely, extremely successful buyback programs. Once that line is found and all of the weapons that fall outside of that line, aggressively priced buyback programs can get thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of these weapons off our streets. They work. Other countries have proven it. We can do the same. We have to find the will and the power. And I thank you. I'm happy to work with you in the future around this. And thank you. Have a beautiful, blessed afternoon. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.